One of the most important aspects of Descartes' philosophical legacy is his distinction between mind and body. This permeates the Meditations. It's introduced with the dream argument, which allows Descartes to doubt that the external world outside of his mind exists, which includes then for him even the existence of his very own body. It is expanded in the second meditation when he concludes that the essence of mind is thinking and the essence of body is extension. It concludes the meditation with his reflections in meditation number 6, where he affirms again that mind is thinking stuff that is not extended, body is extended stuff that is not thought. There's a very sharp distinction here. You recall the second meditation where Descartes defines the self as a thinking thing, and he does that specifically in a way which attacks the Aristotelian concept of the soul. For Aristotle, there is a distinction drawn between soul and body, but there is no sharp distinction made there. The soul, in fact, for Aristotle is the form of the living body, so they are closely related as form and matter. Just as you can't separate the spherical form of a globe with the physical material out of which it is made, form and matter are joined in a way that are not really so distinct or separate as Descartes is distinguishing mind from body here in the Meditations. Indeed, it's something of a debate within Aristotle. Aristotle entertains this. We won't get into it, but whether or not soul could exist separately from body or not, and if so, if at all, what part of soul. But we saw that their soul for the ancient Greeks, certainly for Aristotle, is associated with physical sorts of functions. Okay? Reproduction is an activity of soul because only living things do it. Digestion is an activity of soul. And we saw that in the second meditation, Descartes separated those sharply. Anything that was in any way physical has nothing directly to do with soul. That's all mechanical, like a machine. Anything that is mental is ideas, different forms of thinking, modes of thought that are contained within an immaterial, unextended mind. So these are fundamentally separate. This is certainly what also leads Descartes to conclude that animals don't have any feelings, any consciousness. Animals are just like machines. And if you cut them open in the laboratory to see how they work, and they scream and cry, then this is simply the sound of a machine breaking down. Sort of the kind of sound that you get if you start your car and not realizing that it's already running, try to start it again. So why is Descartes so interested in this sharp distinction? Well, it's fairly clear, I think, by now, I hope. Descartes has a conception of nature. Descartes sees in modern science the potential for fundamentally understanding the workings of nature and seeing how everything is necessarily connected. And Descartes has a fundamentally deterministic view of nature. Everything that happens in the physical world cannot have happened otherwise because it is so determined by a cause. Just as if you can imagine a billiard balls on a table. When the cue ball hits the pack of balls, they will ricochet around the table. They'll all come to rest in certain places. Where they come to rest, that's all determined by the trajectory, the force of the cue ball, by the resistance of the table, and all of the other physical laws. It's once the cue ball is on its way, unless something else intervenes, the final outcome is already determined. So Descartes has a deterministic view of nature. All of nature works exactly like a machine. Descartes, however, certainly wants to say that that is not the case with the human mind. The mind is not determined, but the mind is free. We do have free will. And so in order to have a mechanistic and a deterministic interpretation of nature, and yet to preserve free will, Descartes makes this extremely sharp distinction between mind and body. There's nothing that they share at all. Mind is thinking stuff with no extension, so it's immaterial. It couldn't affect body in the way that one body can bump into and affect another body. And body is extended stuff without thought. It doesn't have any free will or any will at all. It only changes its dispositions based on whatever external forces collide with it. So this solves a problem for Descartes. It allows Descartes to give a mechanistic and deterministic account of nature, while at the same time maintaining that we have free will. And at the same time, it creates problems too. And the main problem is to account for how mind and body are connected. We have, as an outcome of the meditations, a dualism of mind and body. These are the two fundamentally different stuffs, different substances that make up the world. But there's no way to clearly explain how we can have causal interactions between them. Something physical happens to my body. I stub my toe. That causes a pain. We can trace it through the nerves up to the brain. But then there's a conscious feeling that I have. There's a mental event as a result of that, not something physical. Or I decide to do something and my body acts in accordance with my will, and so there's a physical intervention in the deterministic world, physical intervention that starts with a free mental decision. But how are these two connected? Descartes, of course, could not explain this. And this is a problem that, to some extent, all of the subsequent philosophers of this period are dealing with. So we will see all of our philosophers that we're going to be looking at subsequent to Descartes, both empiricists and rationalists, dealing with and attempting to give some sort of explanation for the relationship of mind and body, and to resolve this issue of Descartes' dualism.